designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is the podcast designed for real estate professionals. We're here to encourage, empower, and educate you on the subject of real estate, my favorite topic. Today, our guest is Rachel Adler. Rachel, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so Rachel and I have become really good friends. We actually originally met a couple of years ago, and the way that we became associated with each other is we were both on the cover of Realtor Magazine back in 2012. Gosh, 6 years ago. It feels like forever ago. As 30 under 30 honorees. We're part of the same class. So that means we're officially growing old together. And Rachel is here to talk about a big topic, a topic that I know a lot of team leads and company owners really want to figure out is mentoring. We're both millennials, and that's not a dirty word. And I would say that we've both had great mentors in our lives. And so, Rachel, what I want to talk about at first is just kind of dive into your real estate career, how it got started. There were some real humble beginnings. There were some interesting trials and tribulations that you had at the beginning because you found yourself kind of outside of your house, moving out on your own at an early age in high school, and you became a real estate agent at the age of 19. And so just tell our audience kind of how that all came to be and maybe some of the struggles you experienced as a young person trying to figure out the real estate industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So just like you said, I left home at 17 and was working to support myself full-time as well as going to school. And working became more important than school. And so I left school about the same time I left living at home. They saw promise in me at my job, and I was promoted to management at 18. I don't know how they took me seriously, but they did. And through that was making great money and decided to go buy a house because my parents instilled in me the value of homeownership, and bought my first home at 19. And through that process really was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. If this had happened 5 years forward, the fear of being commission only, the fear of starting something would have taken hold, and I don't know that I ever would have done it. It's I think it was my naivete at 19 that really made me take the leap.
All right, so the School of Hard Knocks is where you went for college because you were 19 years old, and you told me that you had an attitude problem, which is really, upon further reflection, that was the issue, right? That you were just running away from a bunch of different things and making some bad decisions. And so you found a career in real estate, and you had some mentors to start. So before we talk about you mentoring and what's made your team successful, because I know that your team really enjoys working with each other, and you're a high producing agent in Seattle, Washington. Let's talk about the mentors that helped you kind of get from that early 20s, Rachel, to the one at the end of that decade that was on the cover of Realtor Magazine. So, I mean, in 10 years, you're going from basically high school dropout. You finished high school, obviously, but to then, really national success in the real estate world. It's pretty cool.
It's crazy when you put it that way. So my first mentor was my first employer. So she took a chance on me when we bought our house. I told my agent, I want to do this. And she introduced me to a friend who hired me as an assistant. And I really learned the ropes, and I stumbled onto that. I lucked into it. She now has gone on and she teaches all over the place, mentors herself. And it set me up for success because I didn't know any other way than to be systematized, organized, to provide outstanding service. And, I built my philosophy on what she was doing.
Yeah, I feel like a great mentor, and you're going to have the ability to meet my mentor. You and I are going to do an interview in Denver live as a part of our podcast at this big reunion that we're doing next month. And my mentor, Matt Ritter, is actually going to be a speaker there. So I found when I worked for Matt, I was 22 years old, just right out of college. And a lot of the talks that I do today are about mentoring, and that it's really someone that would give you this advice that you wish you knew when you were 22. And it's coming from their perspective. They may be 5 or 10 years older than you, and they're giving you advice that they really wish they knew when they were your age. And I feel like it's almost like that older brother or that cousin that, isn't, it isn't literally your parent, but it's someone that is close to you, that's willing to invest in you, and can kind of smooth out those rough edges. And so I think great mentors really do that for us, and they give us a shot. And I'm going to read a quote that you gave to me as we were doing an interview for the book that I'm writing. And you said, for most of us, all it takes is someone believing in you and giving you a shot. And that's a quote I've shared in many presentations. And I can see the entire audience when I do that. They go, wow, like that is the essence of a great mentor for someone that's young. And so if you could just dissect where that statement came from and kind of the feelings that you have behind that, because obviously that took many years for you to feel like, all it takes is for someone just to give you a shot.
Yeah. Well, and that really came from where I was in, like, thinking back where I was in my life. Like, I had a strained relationship with my parents. I'd moved out of the house. I left school. And so I really had an issue with authority because I had people around me that didn't maybe believe in me the way I wanted to be believed in. And then somebody gave me a shot and made me manager at this coffee shop. And that allowed me to make the kind of income to go buy a home. And then that person gave me a shot and introduced me to a dear, dear friend. And, when I left that relationship and was starting out sales on my own and realizing like, oh, this is commission only, I went back and worked. I would get up at 4:30, go into the coffee shop at 5 and work from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then go in the bathroom, put a suit on and go into the real estate office, work in the real estate office. And I made great relationships in that coffee shop once I was selling real estate, and sold a $3.5 million house to a customer because they wanted to give me a shot. So that was one of my first sales, my first year. And there are people, I still talk to the people in that, the customers that I earned through that coffee shop. So yeah, I truly, like, it's not a science. I got lucky and I was open to the opportunities as they presented themselves. And I think that's staying open in our lives is so important. Both in finding a mentor, like I had an issue with authority. People would tell me what to do. I didn't want to listen. I wasn't ready to listen. And I shared with you, it took me a couple of years to really realize, like, to shake that chip off my shoulder and realize life would be a lot easier if I would learn from other people's mistakes and be open to hearing what somebody else had to say.
Well, sometimes you have to burn your hand on the oven a couple times before you realize that you want to actually hear someone else tell you that that's not a good idea.
Exactly.
So there's a book that you can barely see it over my head, but it's a red book on the shelf there, and it's called Good to Great by Jim Collins. I've had the pleasure of actually seeing Jim speak in person at an event, and he's a phenomenal thought leader. So that in that book, he talks about people and their luck. And in his presentation, Jim discusses that really everybody has the same amount of luck. And a lot of people often criticize successful people as saying, oh, they just got lucky, or everything they touch turns to gold, or whatever the cliches are. And Jim says, actually, what we've found is everybody has the same amount of luck. It's just what they do with those luck events, how they decide to take those opportunities, maybe born out of adversity, which I hear a big theme of that in your early start. And you chose to work hard. You chose to position yourself in a spot. All of a sudden, we're working in a coffee shop. You're working really early hours compared to what you were having to do to get up for high school when you were living at home, right? So all of a sudden now you're being programmed with a new set of software, if you will. So all of a sudden, you're now waking up at 4:30 in the morning and you've got to hustle, and you were working on your muscle of hustle. And then all of a sudden what happens is you just keep taking these opportunities that other people are giving you. They're giving you a shot, but you ran with it. And I think that's really the big thing is, as someone that is getting mentored by someone that's very successful, you're going to get an opportunity to have a lot of things put in front of you that otherwise wouldn't be there. And what you have to do as the mentee is take that opportunity and run with it. Work very, very hard, work diligently, and respect that mentor in that they're giving you a shot. So I think there's that parallel between the two that I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
So now you're the mentor, and we've discussed this at length, that you've got a great team. You've got a team that loves to giggle together, as you put it, which I think is a great way to put that. You've had such a wonderful group of people around you. And that doesn't happen immediately, right? It sounds like you've really developed your hiring process. It sounds like you had a lot of introspection, figuring out what you need to have around you. And so let's talk a little bit about your team. You're at Windermere Real Estate in Seattle, Washington. And just tell the audience who works with you, not literally their names, but the type of roles that you have, and how you've brought that group together.
Yeah. So there are 4 of us that are sales. So we have a buyer's agent that her job is to win the deal once the house is found. We have a showing agent. Her job is to scout for the property. So she spends all her time on the MLS showing property. That's her only job. And then we have a listing specialist. And then the other 4 are part-time. So we've got 2 admins, a transaction coordinator, and a marketing person. And I just found over the years, like, you could find one full-time person to do that job, but like, I love all these ladies and none of them really want to work full-time. So I'd rather have them in my world than have one person less dynamic that, so that's our.
Well, I know a bit about your team, and you have said that this is kind of like Rachel's sorority. Is that right?
I mean, I don't know from sororities because I didn't go to college, but yes.
But you've manufactured that. You work with all females, and I think that's probably something that's a testament. And I think guys and gals can work together, but you've clearly found this great setup of professionals that you enjoy working with that are also your friends. I mean, they're people that have become friendly with you. And I think as a mentor, that's also very important to feel like everybody's comfortable working around each other. And you develop that environment, but the culture of the team is also responsible for keeping that environment fun and enjoyable to work in.
Yeah, I agree. And my significant other is in corporate America, some of the largest corporations in the country. He's been in upper management, and I come home and I'm like, oh, so-and-so's having a baby and this is what's going on and her doctor's appointment and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, why? You're working. Like, you don't talk about this stuff. Like, but it's real estate. Like, we get into our clients' lives at crazy challenging points, and oversharing happens, and that just bleeds into the team. And yeah, it's definitely not corporate America in our office.
That's great. And that's what I love about real estate. There's a community aspect around it, and your office, your team should really reflect that as well. Because we are working with the public, and we're working with people that want to intersect with us, and we're working with them at a time where it can be stressful and it can be really challenging. And if it's really serious and cold, and that just doesn't feel like an environment that a lot of people are going to enjoy working in all that often. So I think you're smart to set up a team that everybody enjoys working around each other. And that's easier said than done, right? There's probably been some hires that have been really bad. I've certainly had some, and my presentation in April is going to be on hiring and why a lot of us hate hiring in real estate, because it is difficult. And so what are some things that you have found with your team? You love these ladies that you work with, and there's 8 of you, right? 8 total on the team? Yeah. Okay. So you've got this great team. It's a group of people that loves working around each other. And I think that as you've developed that team, you've kind of learned a lot of things about mentoring. And so when you assemble this team, how do you treat the people that work with you, and what's that mentoring relationship look like versus maybe other teams that you've seen in real estate?
Yeah. So for us, it took me a little while to realize that mentoring and being the team lead is very different than training.
Oh.
And that really clicked for me with this last hire in the last 2 hires in the admin role. So over the last 2 years, I had moved so far beyond like the nitty gritty of contracts and transaction coordinating and that kind of stuff that, you know, I'm helping people strategize new construction projects. And so the nitty gritty was really weighing me down. And so that last person that I trained now comes on and trains all my new staff so that I can stay in a 10,000 foot view. It just makes everyone's world a little happier. I think I truthfully lost some really great people because of the way I was training, because I just didn't have the patience for it.
Oh, that cuts right into my heart because I feel everything you're saying. I found that I'm a great mentor and I'm a crummy trainer or a crummy manager, at least one-on-one. And because part of it, I think, is when you've become a successful real estate producer, you're used to doing things at a pretty high level, and you're also used to doing things your way. And so what I found is I was a micromanager extraordinaire, and I was like constantly looking over people's shoulder and just making people uncomfortable. And I didn't realize that until I kind of burned up probably 4 or 5 different staff members. And it kind of dawned on me, I'm like, okay, the constant here is me. Each of these staff members change, and all of a sudden I'm still here and the problem is still here. So I had to reframe that. And so just recently I've done the same thing where I've got a chief of staff, if you will, that's a business manager. And then I've also got a sales manager, and those 2 people are responsible for the front end of our hiring process. I'm still involved, but I like everybody and I enjoy communicating. And so what happens, I have a very difficult time weeding out people. I just want to hire everybody. That's what serves me well in my brokerage career. I'm a people person and I enjoy being around people, and I find different things that I like about each person. So they're the ones who really vet people out. They're the ones who really put the systems in place. Now they're doing it based on my knowledge of the business, because I've been in the business 14 years. They've been in the business just a couple of years for each of them. So I think that's really a very important distinction. Training is very different from mentoring. So mentoring, then if we're going to dig really deep into that, there are 7 different things that we've talked about in a presentation that we did last year. And this comes from an article out of The Ohio State University, Susan Metros and Catherine Yang. There's 7 different types of mentors. And they put this together, in The Importance of Mentors is the name of the article. So number 1 is the wise leader. Number 2 is the life coach. Number 3 is the teacher. Number 4 are peer mentors. Number 5 is a confidant. Number 6 is the self-help mentor. Number 7 is the inner mentor. So I'm going to go through each one of those. And I know that there's some that you feel like don't really connect with you. We've talked about that. And then there's others you feel like that's exactly what I do for my team. And so the wise leader is it's that person at the pinnacle of their career and is worthy of and willing to impart. And I think the worthy of and willing to is very important. And I think that you're a wise leader. I know that we're perceived as young, as we're both 35, but the reality is you've been in real estate since you were 19. I've been in real estate since I'm 22. All of a sudden, a decade and a half has gone by and people look at you as a wise leader. So isn't that weird just to think about that? We kind of discussed that it's strange that all of a sudden you look back and you've got someone who's maybe 22 or 23 that's really kind of in a situation of adoration where they say, gosh, Rachel's got it all figured out. So as the wise leader, how do you impart knowledge to someone that's younger? What are some of the things that you think about when someone's asking you for advice?
Gosh, that's a great question. And you probably see me over here making faces as you're saying some of this stuff, because it's hard for me to, I have so much left to learn and so much growth left. So it's hard for me to think of myself as wise at this point. But yeah, I think just for me in mentoring, I try to ask more questions than answering their questions, right? Like they've got a burning question that they've got for me, and I follow that up with 3 or 4 questions of my own, to really try to drill down into what the root of the issue is. And we do this with our clients too. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where I can be most of service to the people who come to me for help, is to really get to know them and meet them where they're at. And maybe it's not a piece of my story that will help them as much as helping them understand really what they're trying to get at.
Got it. So I'm going to put you on the spot. This will be fun, I swear. Yeah. So I'm going to be, young 22-year-old Kyle. I work in Rachel's sorority. I'm the only guy that they let come into the sorority. And so just kidding, very tongue in cheek. So Rachel, I'm trying to get my first listing, and I'm really struggling. With how to even try to get my first listing. What advice do you have for me?
Well, what have you tried so far?
Well, I've tried to door knock in a neighborhood. I kind of walked around and gave people my business card and said, I'm a new realtor in the neighborhood.
How did that go?
Didn't go well. I didn't get a listing. What the heck? Maybe it was something I wore, or maybe I, smelled funny or something. I don't know what it was. What should I do though? Is door knocking something that's successful for agents?
It could be. Yeah. I mean, what do you like to do?
What do I like to do, like on the weekend or?
Yeah.
So I like to play lacrosse. I like to hang out with my wife, and I like to be active, and we're kind of foodies. So we like to go to restaurants, and we love Seattle. Seattle's like the coolest. And at some point I want to retire on Bainbridge Island. So I love Seattle.
Yeah. So when you're playing lacrosse, you're doing that with other people. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really cool. Most of the guys that I play lacrosse with are pretty successful in the banking industry and in professional services. It just seems like there's a big trend between guys that went to college and play, lacrosse after college in a men's club. They all just seem to kind of be, working downtown and driving nice cars. So I want to be like them someday.
Yeah. Do they know what you do for a living?
I don't know. I mean, if I don't know, then they probably certainly don't know. So maybe I should tell them that I'm a realtor.
Yeah. Take them out for coffee.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just put you on the spot. There's a very simple example of mentoring, but I think that what you do there is very similar to what like a counselor would do, or a psychologist, or someone that, that you're directing someone into what works for them, right? Instead of saying, do this, do that. And it may not, that paint by numbers approach may not work for someone. So you're kind of allowing them to give you some information and steering them based on what you're hearing from them.
Exactly.
Awesome. So second type of mentor is the life coach. Now, I have had an amazing life coach named Rory Vaden. Rory Vaden is a New York Times bestseller of a book called Take the Stairs. He personally coached me. And then I've had some of my other coaches. I've had Chris Oakley on the podcast. So everybody knows I'm a big advocate of life coaches. Speaking with you, Rachel, that's not something that you've personally had much success with, but that's a great area that if you want to fast track the mentoring process and you're maybe a solo agent and you're not really looking around your office, not really feeling like there's someone there that can help you, professional coaching is amazing. Teacher, we've all had teachers. Rachel, decided to leave high school. And so maybe some of her teachers weren't so nice to her, but I'm just kidding. But all kidding aside, oh, maybe that's true. The attitude. So all of us have had that one or two great teachers. And so as you think of a teacher, Rachel, what comes to mind with how someone helps the student learn?
Oh, great question.
So what I will say is that, I've got 3 kids. It's easier to see teaching from the perspective of a parent because I'm not the one who's in the classroom. And so each of our children, we've got twins that are first graders, and then our oldest is a second grader. They all have performance reviews. And a lot of the great teachers have the child in the performance review with the parents. And that's not a way of shaming them or making them feel bad. At first I was like, gosh, this is really kind of intense, but it's so that the child has an opportunity to speak up. It's so that the child hears everything. There's transparency there. And so I think with great teachers, they have that constant thought process of wanting to make sure that the student is learning in the way that they need to learn. all of us have different learning styles. And I think one of the issues with people in high school at times is that you get certain teachers that are just kind of like, hey, we got to learn it this way, or we're teaching to the test, or we're teaching so that I can get a promotion or whatever. And I'm not trying to rag on teachers, but the really, really good ones, I think, focus on the learning elements for each individual student and how they need to find the answer themselves. And they don't give the answer to the child. They actually show them the way to getting to the answer, which is what you just did with your question and answer as we did that brainstorm, that role play.
Yeah. Well, and I think in one of the Malcolm Gladwell books, I'm blanking on whether it was The Tipping Point or Outliers, they kind of talk about the children of middle class families go on to do really great things because the children are involved in the decisions of their life. Parents are negotiating with their children from a very young age. And I know for myself, my dad taught me to be a great negotiator because if I got grounded, I would figure out a way to talk my way out of it. And he was a softie, and now I can talk my way out of almost anything. So yeah, I think what you're saying about, the kids being there and the kids being part of that process, like, you're teaching your children such amazing life skills of how to speak up to adults. And there's not fear or intimidation there. It's a collaborative environment. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is really cool. And great teachers empower. And that's one of the 3 E's that we use to intro the show. Empower and educate is the second one. And they do that through encouragement, which is the third. And so I think that you've got this great teacher that's going to help someone learn. And it's all about the learning process for the student, not about the teacher feeling like, gosh, I'm the smartest person in the room. The reality is that they're teaching the class, but they're helping each student get to their individual learning capacity, which I think is great. All right, so next one is peer mentors. Now, I will tell you, for me, this felt really, really strange at the beginning, especially once the 30 under 30 accolade became public. All of a sudden, I'm 29 years old and you're about the same age at that time as well. And I've got people that are my same age asking me for advice. And I'm like, I'm just kind of muddling through my late 20s and trying to figure out what my early 30s are going to be like, just like you. And so as a peer mentor, this is sometimes an informal relationship with someone that's going to be similar in age or similar in circumstance, and it's going to be colleagues pairing up in the office. So did you have any experiences like that where people were like, Rachel, you're winning all these awards and you're nationally recognized now by NAR. What was that like for you when you started to become a peer mentor?
Yeah, it was crazy, right? Because again, you're 29, you're like, who am I? But I think the best example I can think of that right now in our world is the most recent addition to our team. We followed a very similar path where, like, we both worked for the same coffee company. We both started at Windermere at a very young age in an administrative role. She was an office manager in the office I worked at for 7 years, and we just stayed friends over the years, and went out on her own selling about 4 years ago. And she is incredible. Like, I joke, like, she's me. She matches my drive and intelligence and all of that, but she's 1,000 times nicer than I am. And I see so much promise in her that I was like, I want this gal on my team. So when we knew we were ready to add another person, she was my first choice. And I just approached her, and through talking to her, really learned that, she is just getting to the point where her momentum is starting to kind of move, like that boulder's starting to roll on its own, and was really nervous about, she felt like if she joined a team, she'd been approached to join teams in the past, and she felt like, she'd have to step away from what she'd already built in order to do that. And I had a mentor who did just that to me several years ago, where I joined her team and had to step away from what I had built. And I knew that, together everyone achieves more. Like, it would be crazy and short-sighted of me to not support her in continuing to build her own business while working under our umbrella. So we have marketing for our team and with our logos and branding and all of that. And we still support her marketing to people with her own team. From a peer mentor perspective, like digging in and really figuring out what her hesitation was in joining our team and wrapping around that and helping her build the trust that she knew that, you know, my ego's not in this. It doesn't have to be my name on the letterhead. Like, we want you. And I knew that I could plug in all the support behind her. You know, I'm 5 years ahead of her, so she can just jumpstart forward that 5 years and the places she'll go.
Yeah, and I think that a good way of summarizing what your thought process was is the way I feel about mentoring, and I can tell that you feel this way as well, is that you're really a guide for that person that you're mentoring. And what they're needing someone to be able to show them the way. And they're needing someone to do that without having to go through all those experiences on their own. They're going to end up having to have their own struggles, of course. But I think that really, really good mentors, good peer mentors, make sure that they make it about that person getting to the destination that they want to get to. So I found this with one of my colleagues. He's amazing. We're very similar age. He's a few years younger than me, but he's had a different path in real estate than I have. He's worked at a couple of different companies, both here in Denver and in Boston. And he recently came back to Denver, felt like he was at the right company. This is before he started working with us, but just was having really difficult time getting traction. And a lot of it just had to do with our name, our branding. Once he started joining us, he was making the same calls. He was using the same amount of energy and drive and tenacity, but he was doing it with a different banner that he was waving. And he was also doing it with someone that could say, hey, avoid talking to this person or do talk to this person. And there's a lot of repeat business in my arena in multifamily investing. So there's a lot of people we knew, and we said, hey, these are great people to work with. And sometimes it was people we had relationships with already, but we said, hey, that's okay. You're going to reach out to that person, and I might miss talking to that person for 6 months. So really allowing him to get to his desired destination was what my job was. And I benefited from it, both from a learning standpoint, but also I was able to make some commissions in that exchange. And he's now at a point where he's thriving, and he's off our team, but really thriving in our company, which I own. And so that it's a benefit. And I think if you're a mentor, that's the thing you've got to focus on, is this is making sure that the mentee has direction in that area that they want to grow into.
Absolutely.
All right. So the confidant is the next one after peer mentors. Now, confidant is something that I have found after achieving some success, after achieving some notoriety. And it feels weird to say it that way, but the reality is you start to get to a point where you're like, I'm not sure I want to share all of my issues out loud to everybody. And so confidants I have found to be very important. I have two mastermind groups that I'm a part of. And one of the mastermind groups is digital. It's for people all across the US. The other mastermind group is here locally. And I'm the youngest guy in the room. There's one other person that's a 30 under 30. Her name's Amanda, but everybody else is in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they're all either team leads of big teams in real estate, or they're broker owners. And so they're the people that I want to be like when I grow up. And so I can pull them aside and say, hey, I'm having this issue in my office, and I can do that in confidence. And I think that's real important. Do you have anybody that's like that for you in your sphere of influence right now?
Yeah, I mean, of course we have, but for me, it's more like the peer mentoring has spilled over into the confidant relationship. I don't have that person who's ahead of me who's done this all before. It's more like the people that I came up with who made it through 08, 09, 10, 11, 12.
They're scrappy.
Yeah.
Then that's good. I mean, those are people that you feel like have gotten some battle scars, that know where you're coming from, and you know you can share some of those deeper things that you feel like, you know, I can't talk to my brand new staff member about something that they're just not going to have that same way of relating to me. They weren't through that period of time.
Right. And these are people that they know me, like they've known me through personal relationships. They've known me through professional relationships. I've bounced around companies a lot. Like they've been there through it all. And those are, yeah, that's who I go to for that kind of stuff.
So the next type of mentoring, mentor number 6, is the self-help mentor. Now, I'm a big geek when it comes to self-help. And it's something that I hope at some point I can be a thought leader. I get all of my guests a gift. And so you're going to get a gift from me from one of my favorite self-help mentors, Dave Ramsey. So his book, Entree Leadership, is all about how he built his business. And it goes over hiring and firing and mentoring and how you handle staff disputes and how you create a vision and how you create a mission statement. And just some of those things are things you've already got going on, but this book is one of the easiest books to digest for business leaders. And I love it because the title is Entree Leadership, and it's a combination of the word entrepreneur and leader. And I think that there's a lot of people who've got the entrepreneur thing figured out. That's something that both you and I did early in our career. It's like, hey, we're just going to go, we're going to sell, and we're going to just get out there and do things. And we're going to learn through failure, and we're just going to keep grinding and keep scrapping. But then the leadership part of things, I think, is really what ties into mentoring. And being a leader is very difficult because there's got to be a willingness on the part of the person to be led or that's following. And so I hope you enjoy this book. And self-help mentors are all over the place. They can be people that you can literally see on webcasts or podcasts, but they can also be people that have passed away. Zig Ziglar's a great self-help mentor. Stephen Covey's another great self-help mentor. And these people have long passed away, but are still, their legacy is still out there. And then the final, which I think is very interesting, number 7, is that inner mentor. And from an experience that you had, Rachel, where you've had maybe some bad mentoring, you've talked about kind of that inner confidence and how that can get damaged. And again, that goes back to your quote that I shared earlier, which was, for most of us, all it takes is someone believing in you and giving you a shot. So we talked about someone giving you a shot, giving you opportunity, but that belief in you, how does that feel? Kind of go through your emotions on what it feels like to maybe receive some bad mentoring and what that does to your self-confidence. And then obviously the positive side of that, what have you done to create inner confidence in yourself?
Yeah. So, and I kind of touched on it before. I had a mentor who, she definitely didn't have conversations like this. She was wildly successful in her heyday and traveled with Mike Ferry as top 1% and was phenomenal. I learned so much about hardcore sales from her that, I mean, has made me who I am today. But when it came to struggling, like working through building me up as a person and giving me, letting me fly from the nest and watching me shine, she didn't have that. So she built on pain as a tool as a method of growing to that next step, which we all know is not a great way to go. But that's taught me a lot. Like when you're ultimately in a mentorship or training role, team lead role, there are going to be frustrations. And for me, like when I'm frustrated, it's not pretty. And so really like putting myself back in a place of I was the frustration and how that was dealt with in a negative way, and how can I flip and do something a little more positive. I mean, yeah, I've got some stories about her. I won't go there, but.
No, that's okay. And the idea is we're not going to, bash someone that maybe wasn't the right fit. But what I hear in that is that just because someone was successful doesn't mean that they're going to be a great mentor for you. And so a lot of times I think we look at success superficially and say, gosh, they've got it figured out, I should go work with them. And that's not always the case. You want to find that right fit. My kids are in elementary school, and every year, this time of year in the spring, all of the teachers within the grade that they're in meet to talk about where they're going to recommend the kids to go for teachers next year.
Oh.
And they call it, I forget what they call it, but I think it's a right fit spot is what they call it. And they want every student and every teacher to have a right fit spot. Hopefully the idea is that you're going to create a classroom that's going to be the best classroom for everybody, for the teachers and for the students. And they're never going to be able to get it perfect. But the idea is that they want to pref certain students to be with certain other students because they learn well together. And then obviously we know that there are bad influences as well. And so I think that that's really the way that I would summarize that, is that it's not always so much about, gosh, is someone successful and can I learn from them? There's tons of successful people. Pick the right person that's willing. And I think that's the big thing. We started off with the WISE, that WISE mentor, and that's a person who is willing and able and can communicate from a position of success. But they've got to be willing, and they've got to be someone that's going to have a heart of a teacher.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've done a little bit of mentoring in my office with newer agents, and there was pay offered, and I turn it down. Like, mentoring should come from the heart. It should be completely selfless. It should be about goal of wanting the other person to succeed and nothing more. It's not for your own personal accolade or personal enjoyment, because resentment gets built if there's compensation involved, or it doesn't come from a pure place. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have found that you're, as someone that's being mentored, it's not always your team lead, if you're the younger person on the team, that's going to be your mentor. Because in some instances, that person is wanting you to produce for them, and they may not have the time or the willingness to help you through some issues. They just like, get out there and get some stuff sold, and it feels like maybe you're being used. So I have often found in life experiences that someone that is in the office but maybe not quite on my team is a good person to mentor me. One final thought on this inner mentor idea, and also just being a younger person in the industry. Mary Wallace, who's a 30 under 30, she was recognized in 2007 and is one of the people I've interviewed for the book that I'm working on. When she was talking about experience, she said, when you're younger, you don't realize just how much you can accomplish. Experience redefines your mindset. And I think as a mentor, I'd love for you to speak to how you can help people learn from your own experiences, because you've started our interview talking about just absolutely failing forward and going through all sorts of problems and figuring it out the hard way. So how do you help others kind of get through those learning curves?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the days are long, but the years are short. Time passes in this weird, warpy kind of way, and helping people get to figuring out what their goals are, helping people get to achieve their own goals. Like, that's what is at the heart of it. And I think, when people are setting goals, they tend to overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5 or 10. And through part of our hiring process, we sit down with everybody and we set 1 year, 5 year, and 10-year goals as part of their second interview before we decide if they're a fit for the
team.
That's
cool.
Yeah, but it's a mind warp trying to get a 22-year-old to tell you what they're going to be doing in 10 years. So yeah, I think definitely the experience that comes, like, the more years we get under our belt, the more we have perspective to see what we can achieve in the future.
All right, so working with younger people, the way that we're going to close out our interview is we're going to talk about the after action review. This was something that came as a part of our prep for the 30 under 30 real estate conference and mastermind that we did last year. I'm on the phone with you. You're talking about a buddy of yours that's in the military, and that that he did some sort of kind of autopsy of a problem each time. And so I then go talking to my brother and ask him, I'm like, have you ever heard of something like this in the military? And he goes, oh yeah, the AAR, the after action review. We do it after every single mission. And I was like, really? And so I started to do some research as I'm preparing for this speech. And I've now delivered this speech multiple times to different real estate offices outside of our 30 under 30 mastermind. And it is one of the things that people just go light bulb, like, just awesome thing. So when things go wrong, especially, what we want to do is the US military has an after action review, and I'm going to list it out. It's 5 steps. And then I want to hear how you do this within your team. And I know generally things go really well, but when there's a problem and you're trying to dissect it, you're trying to do an autopsy, figure out what went wrong here. This is the process. So after every single mission or every single closing or every single deal that falls apart or whatever it was, here's what you need to ask. Number one, what was the plan? Number two, what actually happened? So Mike Tyson is famous for saying, you know, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So what actually happened once people started slugging at each other? What went wrong? And that's maybe an area we all like to focus in, unfortunately. What went well? So that's the positive inflection of the situation. And what can we do to improve the process next time? And the whole goal here is to improve the soldier, the leader, and unit performance when you're talking about the military. So this was in a circulation by the U.S. Army in 1993. So this is old stuff, but for whatever reason in the business world, we just don't hear about these things. So how do you use the after action review on your team?
Yeah, so we don't do it enough when good things happen. So that's something that, being reminded of it today, I think we need to implement it more often when good things happen. But I think if you're doing it for the first time, remembering to keep it light and casual, especially if you run a sorority, I guess we're calling it, like I do. Because you don't want, especially if the person's a lot younger than you, a lot more inexperienced than you don't want it to feel like they're in trouble, because you're not going to get real answers if you put somebody, like if you're starting in a place where they're backpedaling or something really has gone wrong. So trying to keep it casual where you're not like, okay, we're going to do an after action review tomorrow, but like in a team meeting, start asking those questions, keep it super casual, and amazing things will happen. I also think that remember that like the military does a lot of things right. And Larry Kendall in his ninja training talks about like your buyer consultation. Think of it as a phone number. Like if you put anything out of order, you're not going to call the person. Like if you dial 452 instead of 425, it's not the right number.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the same thing. Like you've got to ask the negative stuff first and then finish with the positive stuff, because you like don't want to get somebody up in fairyland and then cut them down at the knees, right? So
well, and I think that I just love how simple that process is. It's 5 steps, and what's at the root of it is, what was the plan? So if you didn't have a plan in the first place, okay, and Larry Kendall is a huge thought leader here in Colorado, and so the idea is that you've got to start with a plan, and then of course, okay, live bullets are flying now. The client's asking you questions. It didn't work out the way you thought it was, or a deal blew up because of an inspection. Okay, well, you had the plan, and then what actually happened? And so it's so easy for us. The third step is to focus on what went wrong, because that's natural. We focus on our losses. We focus on what didn't go great, and we often forget our wins pretty quickly. I just think that that's the mentality of a top performer. And so that fourth step of really honing in on what went right, and then what can we do to improve the process going forward? We're constantly iterating. The word calibrate is all about improvement. It's all about change. And so I think that that's just a great process. And I love that you say keep it light, because I think if it feels like it's this rigid military thing, we're not in the military, we're in real estate. So keep it light, keep it fun. Make sure to respect your sorority sisters. Okay, so this has been so much fun. I really appreciate everybody that's been tuning in. Whether you're tuning in on iTunes, know that we're on YouTube also, so you can actually see our smiling little faces. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, check us out on iTunes. We'd love for you to leave us a review. The Calibrate Real Estate Podcast is all about encouragement, empowering, and educating real estate professionals to get better. You may be a top producer. Rachel certainly is. You may be getting your start, and you may hear some things that Rachel has said where you're like, wow, this is amazing stuff. So this is all about education and all about improvement. So let's close out the show with what I love to say to everybody who's tuned in. For Rachel Adler and Kyle Malnati, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.